The waitress dropped the tiny pile of crumpled dollar bills onto the cold bathroom counter and stared at them like they had personally betrayed her. $3. That was all she had left in the world on New Year's Eve. Outside the restaurant, fireworks were already beginning to burst across the city skyline, lighting up the icy streets in flashes of gold and blue, while inside, couples laughed over expensive dinners she could never afford. Her mascara had smudged beneath tired eyes from crying between shifts, and her hands trembled as she tried to breathe through the humiliation burning inside her chest. Just 20 minutes earlier, the man she had secretly loved for almost a year had texted her one brutal sentence: "I'm not coming. I found someone else." She had already spent her last paycheck buying a simple black dress and paying half the reservation deposit for a date that was never going to happen. Now she stood alone in the restaurant bathroom where she worked, listening to strangers celebrate while her entire life seemed to collapse in silence around her. Before we continue, take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Stories if you believe every story hides a lesson someone desperately needs to hear. She wiped her eyes quickly before returning to the dining floor because waitresses were not allowed to fall apart during service. The restaurant glowed with warm amber lights wrapped around garlands and tiny silver ornaments. Soft jazz played through hidden speakers while snow drifted lazily outside the giant windows overlooking downtown streets crowded with people counting down the final hours of the year. She moved table to table carrying plates with practiced grace, but inside she felt hollow. Every smiling couple felt like a reminder of what she didn't have. Every champagne toast sounded cruel. She kept forcing a smile so convincing that no one noticed her fingers shaking each time she set down a glass. Then she noticed the little girl sitting quietly at table 14. Most children were allowed on holidays, but this girl couldn't have been older than 8, and she sat with unusual stillness beside a man in his early 30s wearing a faded navy sweater. The father looked exhausted in a way that expensive clothes could never hide. His dark hair was messy like he had been running his hands through it all night, and there were shadows beneath his eyes that looked older than the year itself. Yet every few seconds, he glanced toward his daughter with gentle attention, the kind that revealed a man carrying pain while trying not to let it spill onto someone else. The waitress approached their table expecting another routine order, but the little girl stared at her with heartbreaking curiosity. Children always noticed sadness adults tried to hide. The father ordered the cheapest pasta on the menu for himself and hot chocolate for his daughter. No appetizers, no drinks, no celebration, just enough food to sit somewhere warm until midnight. As she walked away, she overheard the little girl whisper softly that she missed her mother. The man paused for several seconds before answering quietly that he missed her too. The waitress felt something tighten painfully in her chest. Throughout the evening, she found herself watching them from across the restaurant. The father helped his daughter color paper snowflakes on napkins while pretending not to check his nearly empty wallet every time the bill crossed his mind. The little girl laughed occasionally, but there was sadness hidden inside the sound, as if she had learned too young how fragile happiness could be. Around them, glamorous strangers toasted to new beginnings while this small family seemed to be holding themselves together by sheer willpower. Near 11 o'clock, the restaurant manager exploded at the waitress in front of customers because she accidentally dropped a tray while distracted. Glass shattered across the floor like gunfire. Conversations stopped, heads turned, her cheeks burned with shame as the manager screamed that she was careless, useless, and lucky not to be fired. She stood frozen while humiliation crushed the little dignity she still had left. And then something unexpected happened. The single father stood up. Not aggressively, not dramatically. He simply stepped between her and the manager with calm exhaustion in his eyes and quietly said that everyone could see she was trying her best. The restaurant fell silent. The manager scoffed and walked away muttering insults under his breath, but the damage had already been done. The waitress could barely hold herself together. She escaped into the kitchen, fighting tears so hard her entire body shook. A few minutes later, she returned to table 14 carrying their meals with trembling hands. She apologized for the delay even though she had done nothing wrong. The father looked at her carefully for a moment before gently asking if she was okay. Something about his voice broke the final wall inside her. Not because he pitied her, but because he sounded like someone who understood pain personally. She admitted she'd been stood up tonight. The little girl looked devastated for her. Then, after a long silence, the father confessed that this was actually his first New Year's Eve without his wife. Cancer had taken her 8 months earlier. Since then, He and his daughter had been trying to survive the silence left behind in their apartment. He said he brought his daughter to the restaurant because he couldn't bear another lonely dinner at home pretending everything was normal. The waitress suddenly understood the sadness in his eyes. It wasn't weakness. It was grief. Real grief. The kind that changes how a person carries themselves forever. Midnight slowly approached. Outside, crowds gathered beneath glowing city lights while snow covered parked cars in soft white layers. Inside the restaurant, everyone prepared for the countdown. Champagne glasses filled. Couples kissed early. Phones came out for photos. But at table 14, 3 lonely people sat together beneath golden Christmas lights, connected only by invisible heartbreak. The little girl eventually asked the waitress if she wanted to join them for the countdown because nobody should be alone on New Year's Eve. That sentence nearly destroyed her. She sat carefully beside them while the restaurant erupted into the final countdown. 10, 9, 8. Voices thundered through the room as fireworks exploded outside the giant windows in brilliant flashes of silver and red. But somehow, in the middle of all that noise, the quiet little table felt more real than anything else in the building. At midnight, strangers kissed passionately around them while the father simply smiled softly at his daughter and thanked the waitress for sitting with them. No grand speeches, no magical romance, just 3 wounded people sharing one small moment of human warmth while a new year arrived outside. And then came the moment she would remember for the rest of her life. When she brought the bill, she discovered the father had already placed cash beneath the receipt holder. Far more than the meal cost. Confused, she tried to return it, but he shook his head gently and told her everyone deserves one night where they don't feel abandoned. After they left, she opened the folded receipt fully and found something tucked underneath the money. A handwritten note. It said, "My wife used to believe broken people save each other in ways the world never notices. Thank you for helping my daughter. Smile tonight." The waitress sat alone after closing time staring at the note while tears rolled silently down her face. For the first time in months, they weren't tears of humiliation or rejection. They came from realizing that sometimes the people carrying the deepest pain still find ways to rescue someone else from drowning. And maybe that's what kindness really looks like. Not perfection, not wealth, not miracles, just wounded people refusing to let another hurting person suffer alone. Before the ending, tell us in the comments, have you ever experienced a moment when a stranger's kindness changed your life forever? Weeks later, the waitress would still think about that New Year's Eve whenever life became heavy again. She never saw the father as some heroic savior. He was just a tired man trying to survive grief while raising a little girl who missed her mother. But somehow, on the exact night she believed she had become invisible to the world, that small family reminded her she still mattered. And years later, whenever fireworks exploded across the winter sky, she no longer remembered the man who abandoned her with a text message. She remembered the little girl with the paper snowflakes. She remembered the exhausted father who quietly stepped between her and humiliation. And she remembered the feeling of sitting beneath warm golden lights on the coldest night of the year, realizing that sometimes the people with almost nothing left still manage to give each other hope. If this story touched your heart even a little, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more kindness stories that remind us how deeply human moments can change everything.